Sorry about that. Streamlabs. I reset either way, so hopefully it won't happen again. Sorry about that. Okay, so oh, I'm sorry. Body training and stuff. Nope. Aw. Steak and rice sounds good.
Damage registered.
Oh.
How can I be of service, Captain?
Yeah, right. When I do that, I switch games. I just switch games, hop. You see me do it all the time. I switch games like 4 or 5 times a day sometimes. It's just, it is what it is. We have attention spans that aren't too good now, you know? My attention span is worthless. No, wait, it's the first floor. Oh, fuck. Oops. Oh, I fucked that up. Oops. Yeah, my schedule's all over the place. Like, you know, I sleep when I want. Like last night, I felt bad. I bailed at like 4 in the morning. And that's kind of unusual for me of late. Usually I stay up till like 8 or 10 in the morning. But last night I went to bed at like 4 in the morning because I was like, I want to be up a little bit earlier. They have me on strong medication. It's this stuff called mirtazapine. And it wipes me out for, I'm on like, 50, I think it's like 15 milligrams of mirtazapine a night. And it wipes me out and I sleep for 10 hours. 8-10 hours. About. Some nights it's less. Like today, I woke up and I was supposed to do something with my mother, and she canceled on me. I forget the name. It's like Rye Epocan. I better run the yeah, you're younger, right? Like, so the older you get, the harder it is. And I didn't feel it until I was like 38. But when I hit about 38 hop, I knew that I just didn't have as much as in my battery as somebody like you does. It sucks. Like I like, you know, I used to get by on 4 hours of sleep all the time. Yeah, that's you know, I've got a co-op partner who goes to bed at about 12:30 right now, and I think that's about what I'm gonna do too. If he's normally going to bed at about 12:30, I'll go to bed at about 12:30, like maybe a little later than that, like 2:30. I'll probably go to bed about 2:30, and I'll sleep until 10 or 12, I think. Yeah, and that's about when I'll probably go to bed too. I'm starting to realize that the people I kind of value in my life more are the people that have more normal lives, and I might kind of cater to their schedule a bit more. Some nights I'm up until 6 or 8 in the morning, and that's not very normal. I don't think most people do that. I've been thinking about it a lot. Like you know, you want to be a good streamer, you probably don't stream between 3 and like 7 in the morning. I would say that's when you should be sleeping most of the time. And so, but I've been staying up till 6 a.m. I don't care when I go to bed. My job is this, and I don't have a wife or anybody telling me what to do, or a girlfriend or my family or anybody. I can do exactly what I want, when I want, how I want, where I want. So, you know, I definitely don't care about nights and days. I don't care about when it is or what time it is, but I do think it's not very constructive to a normal life to get to like sleep in past, you know, I would say like 9 in the morning. Probably start going to bed at about like 2 in the morning and sleep until noon. And I'll probably leave it like I think noon would be okay. And I've been thinking about like trying to strike a schedule that's a bit better, but honestly, I've tried my whole life and I have non-conformative 24 syndrome, which is like I don't go to bed at the same time every day ever. So I try and dream of like, you know, Hop, I try to dream of having like a normal schedule, but it's been 40 years and my sleep schedule has never been normal. So I struggle with it. Every day it's different. Like today it was noon. The day before that, it was like 8 p.m. And honestly, it wasn't so weird for me to just change it up. The pills make it so I can just sleep whenever I need to. I go to my bed. I plug in my CPAP machine because they have me on oxygen because I have sleep apnea, because I have bad reactions to gluten. And then I eat my sleeping pills, well, my sleeping pill, and then my other pills, and I go to bed. And I sleep for 10 hours. But when I go to bed is almost different every single day. And until they put me on sleeping pills, I was a fucking madman. I would go 6 days without sleep, sometimes without drugs. I was a fucking madman. Without drugs, you know? I would just be like so focused on whatever I was doing. Like a couple of WoW expansions, I would go 6 days, like 3 to 6 days without sleeping, and all I had was energy drinks. You know? And now I can't do that. I'm 40 years old. Can't miss out on sleep. Toxic gas vent. You said I got up at 5 a.m. and I hopped on your stream one morning. Yeah, I'm there. I'm here. Like yesterday, I bailed out after like I think 9 hours or 10 hours. But most days it's like 14, and all last week it was like 16 hours. Like the first few days of Starfield was like 16-hour days. Yeah, sleep paralysis is goddamn terrifying. I've never experienced, but I've heard some horror stories.
Signs of life in the area.
Oh, damn it, that cost me, son of a bitch. It's fine.
Exterior plating damaged.
Yeah, stuff like that, yeah. Yep. I am going to, oh, I'm at where I'm going, but, is there another crystal to the ore story? There's the fishing crystal, which I haven't got. Yup. I think the sound effects are a little too loud. There, that's a bit better. I don't dream, Hop. One of the things about, well, I dream, but I don't remember them. I don't ever remember waking up to a dream. I've never had a nightmare, and I've never had a dream. My brain is totally wired differently. And I don't know, I've never had a dream. It's very weird. Yeah, I've had some weird lucid dreams where I had somebody chasing me over and over again, and they always run at the same speed as me, and that always drives me crazy. So you can't get ahead and you can't get behind. It's really weird. I've had some weird lucid half dreams like that, but never really like real dreams. Stay away from drugs, Hop. It's a bad time. It's a bad time. Yeah, the Final Fantasy music is very good. The composer is very famous. His name is Nobuo Uematsu. Looks like that. He's very famous. He's done a lot of work. He's very good. His work is celebrated worldwide. You'll have to see orchestras playing it. Nobuo has his own metal band called the Black Mages. He's like almost my favorite musician, but he's not though. He's not my favorite musician, but he's close. It's happy. The main thing about Nobuo is it's constantly happy. This is the Windurst. There's 3 nations: Windurst, Sandoria, and Bastok. This is the Windurst anthem. Each city has its own song, and they're very good. All three songs. Yeah, here I'll play a different one from this game. Yes, very good. I love Hans Zimmer. Very good. Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've seen Interstellar, but I haven't seen it a second time. I'll watch it tonight. That's a good movie. Yeah. Yeah, that's that's Christopher Nolan. He's really good. I think. I think Interstellar is Christopher Nolan. It's Christopher Nolan, yeah. Yep. Movies like that are always really good. God damn it. Evener plays Starfield. Yeah. I'm not alone. Evener plays Starfield. Mine won. Fuck yeah. It's getting dark and that's not good. I'm gonna go back now. Bumped my mic. There we go. A little better. Okay. Gotta go to Unity Warp, which is Winter's Woods. Yeah, if you like Gettysburg, you should see Lincoln. Lincoln is exquisite. It's a piece of America. Lincoln was exquisite. Lincoln was one of my favorite films of all time. It stars Daniel Day-Lewis and Sally Field and all these baby boomer people. But I mean, it's super fucking good. Yeah, I haven't seen Oppenheimer yet, Hop. Like, it's, when does so I'm gonna watch Oppenheimer in October. I haven't seen it yet. I could watch a hand cam, but I don't want to. I'm just gonna watch it. But I'm excited. I like Christopher Nolan a lot. I love Christopher Nolan. I think he's a wonderful director. Might be my favorite one. I don't know. He keeps knocking it out of the park. Yep. Oh wait, I don't need to go to the theater. Yeah, that'll be good too. I'm excited for that too. I bet it's super good. Have you seen Speed Racer? Have you seen Speed Racer, Hop? Speed Racer is so good. Yeah, the movies I saw this year, I saw, or no, I only saw John Wick 4. I saw John Wick 4 the day it came out in films, or in theaters, I think, for my mother's birthday. But that's all I've seen this year. Heard of Speed Racer, but you haven't seen it? Okay, so watch the trailer. It's so dope. Emil Hirsch. Emil Hirsch is an amazing, is amazing, yeah.
Your son seems to be interested in only one thing. All he talks about
Is racing. Racing.
He's capable of thinking about.
Racing. Video games. Video games. All I can think about is video games. I'm like Speed Racer, except it's video games.
Is automobile racing.
Yeah, all I can think about is video games.
Racing's everything. From my
So the people who did The Matrix made this.
family, it isn't just a sport. It's way more important than that. It's like a religion.
Are you ready to become a real race car driver? Then sign that contract.
He's just trying to scare you, son.
What you do behind the wheel of a race car has nothing to do with business.
You walk away from me, you walk away from this deal, no matter how well you drive, you won't win, you won't place. I guarantee you right now, you won't even finish the race.
You think you can drive a car and change the world? It doesn't work like that.
Maybe not. But it's the only thing I know how to do, and I gotta do something.
Race. Yeah.
Move it, Speed. It's getting ugly out there.
I mean, that's the people who made this movie.
Skills take time.
I mean, that's the people who made this movie. I think. That's why it's got the same message.
I will consider that. Maybe. Thanks, I think.
I gotta sleep. Nighttime's bad. Can't see him coming. Get hurt real bad. Yeah, they. Oh yeah. I mean, it's sweet. I'll finish it here in a second. I just gotta do some sleeping here. Here we go. Yeah, like it looks crappy on the 1080p, right? But when you watch it in like 4K, you know, Blu-ray, it's great. It's a great movie. It's really high def and very beautiful. It's got a lot of colors and stuff. It'd be a great trippy movie. It'd be a great movie to trip to.
Wasn't my idea.
Yeah.
Oh no?
It was his.
What did you do?
Speed Racer was so good. I watched it recently.
Now he's going to be the best if they don't destroy him first.
Yeah, it was good. Great little action flick.
The president of...
Yeah, I mean, now it looks crappy. But it's not about that. A lot of people worked really hard on that film, and you can see the production value clearly.
Blizzard called me out. Now, Max, why do you guys, of course, know Limit Maximum, was watching my
Spy Kids, yeah.
video of Vinruki. And Quick, who is the president of Blizzard, called me out. Hopefully you guys can understand what's happening here. I'll make it a little bit easier to understand. There we go. And we're gonna play it. Here we go. You ready? Bro, people are gonna love that.
He has to have a take. Oh my god. Quick, the president of Blizzard in chat. The problem is he can't do mythic or heroic successfully. Oh my.
Oh! It is probably true, though. I don't think these guys have the skill to do that stupid shit anymore.
My god. I mean, kind of true. I've only seen him do, like, normal raids when it comes out.
This guy will even say it's true.
And then he just, like, stops playing. When I hear...
Yeah, like, fuck that. I mean, it's not fun anymore.
Asmin talk a lot about retail.
I'm the same way. I couldn't do that shit either. I couldn't do it either.
There's a few...
That shit is for kids when you're, like, 24, you know?
Points he has where it feels like He just said them at one point, and his extremely doomer audience is going to true everything he says. And if you just have 50,000 people true you too many times, you just start really, really being confident in your bad taste about a game that you barely play. And that's what this sounds like. I mean, Quick said it the dirty way, but yeah, I mean, I need to hear the actual take.
Is that it? Because I want to make sure that I don't just like go off half cocked. Is that it? Okay, all right. Watch the oh, I cannot watch the whole thing. It's gonna take forever. That's it. Okay, let's begin. I think that if you don't play the game at all, you do become out of touch.
Yep.
However, I think that if you play it all the time, you also become out of touch. And the truth is that if your job is playing the game, you will never understand an average player because they don't play the game as a job. And that's okay. That just makes sense. I think he's right. I don't understand the average player any better than anybody else does. I'm just putting my opinion out there. But the numbers, the data of how many people are clearing these raids is low. And it has continued to get lower.
Help me, please? I need to get to my ship, and I can't do it alone. We got attacked by some local predators. I managed to bunker down here, but now I have no way out. There's too many out there. I'll get mauled to pieces if I even try to make it alone. But you seem like you're capable. You up for a quick rescue? Then let's do this. My ship's not too far from here. I'll mark it on your scanner and we can book it together.
Yeah, that is really beautiful what you just said, Hop. I know it's like I want to kiss your ass or whatever, but that's actually very fucking beautiful what you just said. I actually really agree. We forget all the time that the video games are for the kids. The video games are for the kids your age. And my fellow boomers, they're like, they rip into each other all the time, and they forget that this shit's for the kids. It's for the kids. Who cares what my opinion is of Starfield? I thought it was a game of a generation, and I think it's a good game for kids to play. I would say it has a lot of depth and a lot of scope, and it's beautiful. It's got a lot of good music. It's got gun combat that'll train you how to shoot guns well. It's a good game. So, whatever, and a lot of people, I watched today, like a 20-minute video from Moist. Moist saying that Starfield is bad. I think that was last night. I went to bed. I think you were probably sleeping. But I went to bed. I watched a video today. Moist came out saying, I want to rewatch this video now, I think. Moist said that Starfield is bad, which is kind of funny. And he was right, though. A lot of the things he said is right, though.
Good evening, gamers. Tonight I bring you a game.
Yeah, the Rust Recoil. I went through that whole phase where everybody complained about the Rust Recoil, and I was like, yeah, I mean, it doesn't change the game.
Gift more valuable than gold.
And it seems like Face Punch really stepped in that one. But I mean, it doesn't change the game very much.
Other opinion on Starfield. I know there's already a million of them out there, but this one's unique. This one's not like the other reviews. This one's quirky and zany with a real nice personality and a big pair of honkers. It's my full thoughts on Starfield so far, so it is going to be a review, but it's also kind of an admission of my weakness, because I'm just gonna take the egg on my face here and say I don't think I'm finishing the game. Now, everyone says that the game gets good after 12 hours. I am just shy of that 12-hour mark, and I gotta be honest with you, sports fans, I can't envision a world where I hit that 12-hour mark and a switch flips on, and all of a sudden, it's exhilarating. It blows my hair back, and it's a masterpiece.
It's very brave to come out and say you don't like Starfield right now, and I think this is actually very interesting take.
Like, I don't see that happening. But let's just assume...
And he plays it just like me. He plays it kind of halfway. He's like, it's a good game. It's not, I thought it was a good game, actually, but he didn't. But, he says what I always say, which is, Oh, you know, I'm sorry. I forgot that I left my phone in the other room, and I really can't do that. I'm sorry. I'll be right back. Really, you think so? Yeah, I was very surprised when he came out to say this, and my opinion of him went down a little bit because it like, you know, but he did have his own opinions. I will say he had his own opinions, and I do like that.
That we are in a fantasy dimension where that.
I'm gonna run it for just 30 seconds, and then I'm gonna turn it off. I'll be right back.
Miserably paced and excruciatingly uninteresting. Like, that is still a bad design. If you have to invest 12 hours before the game actually gets good. So I don't know if that claim is just cope or if that really is true, but even still, it doesn't negate my feelings on how this first just under 12 hours experience has been going. You shouldn't have to put that much time into a game before it makes it worth it. And I want to be clear right away so there's no confusion. It's not because I think the game is bad. In fact, quite the opposite. I think everything in the game is good. But it's also extraordinarily boring and underwhelming. I struggle to stay awake playing it. It's like the cure for insomnia for me. I would rather be listening to my college professor lecture me on the Krebs cycle through Vimeo videos as homework. It would keep me more stimulated than playing through the main quest line in Starfield. And it's not like they've done anything wrong. The thing is, I went into this expecting, on this outrageous amount of hopium, that this would truly be an ambitious Bethesda title that would finally evolve their formula and push it forward. But unfortunately, that's not what it is. This is the standard Bethesda experience that many of you probably know and love, but set in space. No more, no less. And you'll see that sentiment echoed across pretty much every single player out there. That's like the only universally agreed upon thing when it comes to this game. This is a very divisive game, but you'll find one common thread that everyone agrees that if you...
Yeah, which is very interesting. Anyways.
Every single fucking patch. Look at Sepulcher. Look at how much damage that did to the game. That's why nobody cleared the raid. It was one of the lowest clears ever. And yes,
it's
obviously, true. I think a percentage of that is because the jailer didn't drop anything good, for sure. But even then, I think that a lot of these things are harmful. And it's not like, I mean, how many... I'm going to give a few different examples. Gavel, oh yeah, there were a few good things from Jailer, but like, I mean, there's not like tier sets, right? In the same way that there used to be, right? So, from Wrath of the Lich King to Cataclysm, there was like a dramatic difficulty increase. Like, I would say tier 11 was like twice as hard as ICC, especially with the 30% buff. Tier 11 was fucking brutal. And I remember back in my, I played on Kel'Thuzad back then. And how many of you guys all the time in Wrath of the Lich King, like original Wrath, saw GDKPs and pugs for ICC 25-man heroic, 10-man heroic going all the time, constantly in trade chat. Yeah, I saw them constantly. I didn't, maybe you were on a small server, but on Kel'Thuzad was a pretty big server. And so there were a lot of people that were doing the raids. And whenever Cataclysm came out, all that stuff died. And all the people that I used to do GDKPs with and I used to raid with, all those people either quit the game or they just weren't, they had to like join like a super serious guild or they couldn't play. Kata was way too fucking hard.
Kata was not hard. Kata was not hard.
Don't think, and the subs went way down. And yes, obviously, I think a lot of that's because of like, you know, like killing the Lich King. It's like the, you know, it's like the logical ending of World of Warcraft, right? You beat the Lich King, the world is saved. Obviously, it's not the case. You understand the lore, but like from most of the people's perspective, like, yeah, sure. I think there's a lot of reasons for it, sure. And like Cataclysm didn't have as much hype as Wrath, etc., etc., etc. But the point is that a lot of people quit the game after Cataclysm. And I think a big reason for that is because the raids just got too hard. The raids
were not hard.
Way too punishing.
They were a learning curve, but they were not too hard.
Because I think people would have done
We were
this
done
already,
with it in 3 weeks.
I think that definitely the difficulty
oh my God.
acted as a force multiplier. That's whenever add-ons started getting really crazy. That's whenever people started developing like
decent
all kinds
challenge.
of like, different like, fucking UIs and shit like that. That's whenever things got way more customized. And I think the reason for that is because that's whenever the raids got a lot harder. And so the players adapted by making better add-ons. But I also don't so the point is that I think the player drop from Wrath of the Lich King to Cataclysm was in part because of the difficulty of the game, and I think at that point the game became too difficult for average players. How do I know that? I have a personal experience. My mom played Wrath. By the time Cataclysm came out, she said, fuck that, I'm not gonna raid anymore. It was too hard. Straight up, it's too hard. And so anyway, there's number one. Number one is that. Number two is this. I do not think that it is a coincidence that classic hardcore popped off.
All right, let's try this one more time. Let's get into some video game news. Starfield discourse is still at an all-time peak, though the hype is coming down since the game released for, you know, the people who bought the $100 version of the game over the weekend. A lot of people have been playing it. The reviews are in. The game has scored 88 on Metacritic with, I believe,
all right, today isn't some sort of info dump or a guide or an investigation. It's a hot take. Maybe a lukewarm take, obviously, as the title makes clear. I don't know. But witnessing the discourse of Starfield over the past week or so has made me moderately depressed and also forced me to realize just how polluted and angry the gaming community has now become. For those who don't know, when we talk about angry gamers, I actually have a pretty robust foundation to draw from, more than many people might expect.
I feel so blessed that I was able to just shed my anger like this year. I feel blessed. Like, man, I can't remember the last time I really yelled. There's been some times when Starfield really irked me. But I mean, I really haven't yelled in a few days, and it feels really good. Oh, this is a good song.
Back in 2019, CNET actually wrote a hit piece about me called Meet the Angry Gaming YouTubers Who Turn Outrage into Cash. And yeah, it wasn't just about me.
Yeah.
I was the one who actually got tricked the most and straight up talked to the sleazeball who was writing it for like an hour and a half. The entire premise was that people like me, people who criticize video games, are overtly aggressive, unnecessarily outraged, and we basically grift our audiences with angry commentary for no reason. He completely ignored the consumer advocacy stuff and my far more articulated reasons, but whatever. Obviously, I disagree with how that article was portrayed. However, witnessing the discourse unfold with regards to Starfield, it actually gets quite a bit harder for me to do that right now. A few days ago, I published my initial impressions for the game, and the nicest way to put it, the nicest way possible, is that I enjoy Starfield for what it is. I'm at a point in my life where maybe I'm just more open to seeing the good side of things rather than the negative, and I chose to see the bright side while complimenting the things that Starfield gets right. I stand by those impressions, okay? I do. And sure, I probably didn't need to say right from the onset that the haters of the game were wrong, but then again, why should I care about calling people wrong? I do it in a much more aggressive way elsewhere on the channel. I go after scammers and con artists rather often with inflammatory rhetoric, so why wouldn't I project some, at least some, of that same energy here, albeit a much more subdued version? Likewise, people say whatever they want in the comment section about and towards me, or other creators for that matter, so give and get, the name of the game. That being said, what came back as a result was honestly baffling. I genuinely enjoy many different aspects of Starfield. The ship creator, for me, despite somewhat janky controls, is a game in and of itself, while I have a tremendous amount of fun just experiencing some of the random encounters, exploring planets and killing random camps of enemies, or learning the intricacies of how and where I can break the game physics to become stupidly overpowered. That's like a super cool thing for me to do in games. That's my objective. Beyond what the developers intended, really. It's enjoyable, yet imperfect, fun, but very flawed, and I really don't have any problem saying that out loud. Here's the thing. That video has resulted in a rather abundant number of people unsubscribing, which is fine, that's their prerogative, while I get inundated with comments and even private messages, some of them, about how I am unironically, according to these people, paid by Bethesda, shilling the woke agenda, and betraying the essence of video games. Or some nasty stuff involving Todd Howard. They like to say that stuff too. That's just to name a few. let's just get something out of the way once and for all. Here's what a snapshot of my prior Bethesda game coverage looks like during the era of Fallout 76, for anyone who remembers that. Totally scumbag beta. Complete garbage. Let's kick a dead Fallout 76. More glitch than game. Bethesda's broken promise, or the Hindenburg of gaming. That's my coverage, and my tone...
Yeah, I didn't like that. I didn't like that.
Should be very obvious.
I didn't like that.
I have zero...
I didn't like those guys doing that. I like that game. I play it all the time, and I didn't like that. Like, I like the games. I don't like these guys who want to bring them down.
Live to survive. Another day.
What's up, Aquinas? How are you today? Playing some Starfield and some FFXI and listening to some videos.
Zero problem criticizing games or developers or publishers with merciless rhetoric, but I genuinely do not believe that such a level of one-sided critique is justified here and now, in particular with Starfield. But what am I if not a man of the people? So for those of you who need to have it, if you must hear it, fine, here it is. The game is absolutely huge, technically speaking, in terms of raw content and number of planets, yet somehow they managed to create a fast travel simulator, which is the precise opposite of what they led the audience to believe with their marketing material and completely breaks immersion, which is a blunder and a half. The inventory system is terrible, but I circumvented that by investing heavily into my starship building and making a 5,000 cargo capacity freighter. It worked, however, yeah, some people will think that's very tedious. The combat is fucking awful because the mob AI is brain dead. You can break line of sight and they just get confused and walk around. The tactics are on par with something you would have seen at least 10 years ago. And the difficulty is all over the place because clearly the numerical internal balancing is extremely botched. I have fun with broken combat systems, myself personally I do, because I can exploit them to feel overpowered, and again, break the game. But if you don't like doing something like that, obviously you'll think the gunplay and combat sucks. Dialogue is deceptively shallow. I actually didn't even see how bad this part was till after my initial impressions, when I did a bit of save scumming and found out that it's basically a giant spider web of false choices. And a lot of the planets are just dead real estate. There's no point to be there. They just serve the purpose of another planet you can technically go to, exclamation point, and nothing more. I found this out yesterday in a pretty brutal way, where over the span of like 2 hours, I encountered the exact same bandit base 3 times. It was the abandoned hangar location that appeared on separate planets with everything precisely identical, just different levels of mobs. The main city is completely soulless. It's boring. Not acceptable boring, worse than boring for that part. It's a chore to even go there because why would I go somewhere that doesn't interest me? But Neon or Aquila, those other cities are much better. When I stopped fixating on the things I hate, I found that I could be a smooth-talking introverted scavenger on Neon and have way more fun. The skill system is padded out, and though there are certainly a number of really cool choices and progressive unlocks, after level 30 or so it starts to slow down and feel a little too punishing without some sort of perk reset option, which I don't believe exists. To be fair, I found a great way to level up on higher level jungle type planets really early on, so I overcame that issue rather quickly. Again, that's how I play, I break things, but that's what I enjoy. Break them for my own enjoyment, so I don't know, if you don't like that, it's going to be a different story. Graphics aren't very good, however, I tend to not care about that a whole bunch in any game I play. It's not about the graphics to me. And the lack of intuitive map systems absolutely increases your level of frustration while trying to explore the galaxy. I could continue. There's much more I could fixate on, to be sure, but please hear me when I say this. Despite all of that, I'm still excited to log in. I'm still excited to chase down pirate ships.
Yeah, this is more how I feel. I don't think he said anything that I disagree with at all. And I really struggled with this game a lot. But then later on I was like, I still think it's a good game. I don't think I want to play it every day, but it's good. It's a good game. I like the combat enough. Ah. Oh, was there a survival guide? There was. Son of a bitch. I have to go back. Ah, damn it. It's kind of a boring game compared to Rust.
Hijack them, take them back to a city, sell the parts off as I look for the right internal habitat modules that hold crafting benches. By the time I'm done, I'm going to be flying around my own version of a Death Star. It's going to happen. And then continue construction of my, whatever you want to call it, central super freighter, right? That is very fun for me. Yeah, it was tedious traveling all around the universe with the grav jumps till I spent a little bit of time refining the ship, and now I can go halfway across the entire playable space in one single move. Yeah, that's also kind of stupid because this is supposed to be a huge immersive sandbox, and the fast travel breaks the shit out of the immersion. But I get off on efficiency. I play games to get things fast, to break them and be overpowered beyond what the developers intended. So the ability to instantly teleport across the universe after spending however many hours of my time grinding out resources and credits to make it happen, it's a dopamine hit for me. It's a reward, and I like that I can do it. Even still, this really isn't about me defending my personal enjoyment of the game, because I shouldn't have to, and it's perfectly fine to enjoy it, okay? Period. It is also perfectly fine, however, to say, I hate that shit. Get it away from me, it's garbage. And a lot of people are saying that right now. And they can say that. This is where it gets bad. I don't know who this person is, Nina Infinity. I watched some of her stream to get an idea while making this video, and she seems like she just plays games and commentates on them, same as the rest of us. However, this, let me just read it out loud. Quote, I made a tweet about refunding Starfield because I was annoyed about the pronouns and because the game did not run well on my system. For the past 4 days, I have gotten demonetization threats, people wishing death on me, people telling me to go demonetize myself, attacked because of my looks, called a pick-me, a demonetized phobe, you name it. They're now in my Insta and YouTube comments also, commenting on completely unrelated things to try and gotcha me, all because I asked for a refund on a video game. I never called for a boycott of it, I never told anyone else to do what I did. I've always maintained that people should enjoy what they enjoy. And I'm told that I'm a snowflake because I've made a big deal out of nothing. Who is actually making a big deal out of nothing? end quote, even though it wasn't actually a full quote because I put my own words in there, but yeah, you get the picture. On the one hand, being attacked online isn't a bug, it's a feature. I've had my own ups and downs, brush-ups with that in the past. Some of them were pretty bad, especially in video games, go figure. But on the other, what in the world is going on where a game like this and small things like that are being used to just mercilessly attack each other to such an extreme extent constantly? She doesn't deserve that. No one does. Right now, in a weird way, I can see both sides of the coin, as if that were physically possible, simultaneously. I don't really know how it happened, but hopefully I can make some nuanced content while I'm here. I have made videos in the past, no joke, titled SJW Culture is Ruining Gaming. And I still 100% understand why I made that content. I still stand by it to a degree.
I don't
with
believe
new
that
perspective,
at all.
of course, over time. I also realized that Starfield allowed me to have, like, what, 70 hours so far at least of enjoyment, and woke politics never appeared more than one simple selection of pronouns. I know there's a little bit more of that in the game. People have been really aggressively trying to tell me it, but personal experience, I didn't see it. I saw one thing, I pressed one button, I got into it, and then I just didn't notice that stuff rearing its head. I wasn't aware of it, and it didn't jump out at me or ruin the experience in the slightest. That's just my honest opinion. How rotted have our brains become where something that's supposed to be an escapist fantasy is now, you can say things are infiltrating it or whatever, but it's supposed to be an escapist fantasy, is now a rallying cry for Xbox and Sony fans to attack each other over exclusivity rights. Right and left political ideologues get to attack each other over the game's perceived message, and players of the game itself get to attack each other because some of them enjoy it while others don't. The entire thing is just such a wake-up call. Here's another example of what I'm talking about. Alana Pierce, who now works for Sony, and she was actually being attacked by some people because she shouldn't even ever stream the game because of its affiliation with Microsoft. And it's really stupid when you read it. I mean, I can't get it out of my head now how dumb the discourse has become. But anyway, she streamed herself for 7 continuous hours traveling across the solar system to Pluto. When she eventually got there, she phased right through the planet's surface. That's obviously kind of funny, and also highlights how some of the game's more egregious flaws have come through when you compare it to the manufactured expectations. I mean, look, overinflated expectations is a better word, but I'm not trying to attack people that thought they were getting something else. I mean, Bethesda and marketing and all that, there's plenty to criticize in gaming, okay? I'm not trying to say there isn't. But, back on task, she also had to readjust every 30 minutes or so because of a fully functional day-night cycle and planetary rotations that were taking place in real time, which is kind of cool. For context, before my Twitter account got completely removed, I had some kind of argument, I can't remember now, with Alana in a thread somewhere. I don't recall what it was, but I know I was wrong. I regretted it after, and I look back now understanding in real time that the basis foundations of my extremely angry and vitriolic opinions about video games were there, okay? I had reasons to feel protective or upset. And for a lot of hobbies, gatekeeping is 100% necessary, else the hobby gets destroyed. But the way that all of it unfolded was just so blatantly wrong and had no productive use in the world. I look back sort of in shame about how I handled it. Maybe that's called growing up. I don't know. My point is this, Starfield is a pretty messed up video game if you want to look at it through that lens, but the level of vitriol we see right now spewed across forums and threads and live streams all over the place, it just feels wrong. Like deep down in my gut, it feels wrong, too much. You can call the game dog shit and you'd have valid reasons to do it. Likewise, you could call the game a masterpiece after exploring it for 100+ hours, and you would have equally valid reasons to do that as well. Maybe not equally valid. This game just objectively cannot be a 10 out of 10. Okay, sorry. Objectively, it's not a 10 out of 10 ever. That's pretty clear. But you could defend a 7 or an 8. Or maybe even a 9 if you really thought through and had incredibly precise definitions of what that score pertains to. Age-old truth, the most extreme stuff on YouTube gets the views. When I called Fallout 76 garbage, with like really extreme rhetoric, I got 500,000. When I said SJW culture is ruining gaming, I got over 1 million views. But for Starfield, my actual opinion is so much less satisfying or divisive. It's lukewarm. It's a game that I've found a way to have a great deal of fun with, at a time in my life when I want to have fun with a game, and it's a game a lot of people have been waiting for. But it's not a game that deserves to become the focal point of a console war, a political powder keg, and a social media gamer civil war of sorts all at once. I'm getting pretty close to being ready for my final review, which will come out when I feel I've attained the level of undeniable expert, familiar with bugs, the exploits, the quests, and the internal systems alike, all of it. But for right now, the discourse of Starfield is absolutely shameful, in my opinion. You can hate the game. Absolutely, you can hate the game. But it doesn't deserve to be a paragon of everything wrong in the industry. Likewise, you can love the game, but you cannot go around pretending that people who criticize it are somehow gamer chuds or too negative. Angry Joe has been getting reamed for this on Twitter, and in reality, he has some of the same sort of opinions he's always had, articulating them in the same ways, and they're valid, but some people feel so unbelievably attached to Starfield, right to their very core, their identity as a person, they resort to personal attacks, really, really extreme attacks, when the thing that they identify with is criticized even slightly. It's been a super, super long-winded way of saying this, but after my years in gaming, of which there are a decent number now, I look at Starfield with absolute disgust. Not because of the game itself, but because of how we as players are reacting to it, and how easy it is, easier than it ever has been, I expect, to spiral off into more and more extreme, critical, or protective discourse. How about we stop doing that for a little bit and touch some fucking grass? That's it. Maybe I get reamed for this one in the comment section too, I don't know, but after typing all of this out, sitting here and reading my script repeatedly, I genuinely feel better. That's my take. Stop fighting so much about Starfield, because the cold, hard, honest truth is that love it or hate it, the game is just not worth that particular brand of time and energy. And I say this as someone who basically made a career out of being negative and angry. So I see both sides of the coin. It's just new perspective over time. I still understand why I said a lot of those things, and I agree with a lot of them still. But now I see the world in a different way over the past few years.
So do I.
So yeah, the Starfield discourse is absolutely shameful. It's not lost on me how hypocritical all of this is. I'm monetizing myself, complaining about people, complaining about a game. It's not lost on me, okay? I get it. But I do genuinely mean what I'm trying to say. With a long history in gaming, where I came from, how I used to be, how I am now, I actually think that everyone should kind of let it go, and that the discourse around this, the review stuff, the Sony fans, the Microsoft fans, the left and the right, politics being involved, like all this stuff, it's just too much, man. It's a video game. Just enjoy it, or don't enjoy it. You can talk shit about it, or you can say it's great, but just stop attacking each other. If you want to support, please do consider locals, Patreon, or channel memberships. Ad revenue is completely destroyed on YouTube.
With me.
And yeah, those are just way better and more secure for me as a creator. If not, hopefully I'll be a lot more consistent with the content now, and any brands who want to work with me for sponsorships, my email is down below. I'm trying to work
Big Soap Go Washi, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Be with the channel and not just go down the road of the big corporate ones, but whatever. Thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.
What? He, him?
Look at the boomers go bald and angry at the same time.
Okay. Bethesda, I'm gonna say something to you. You should fucking listen. If you want to play, pick your pronouns, then you should have an option to not enter pronoun.
Yes, agreed 100%. The fact that they force you to do it is the problem.
I don't believe this is entertaining. I'm going to get off it.
Today, we're talking about how this Joe Jonas-Sophie Turner divorce has morphed into a straight-up smear campaign. We've got Riptide rescues, people flashing other people from...
Oh, this was really good. Yeah, that was really good.
It's Mr. Beast versus Mr. Beast Burger. Yes, Mr. Beast, the YouTuber extraordinaire, is suing Virtual Dining Concepts, the company behind the Ghost Kitchen Mr. Burger franchise, alleging that the hamburgers are so bad it's a breach of contract. Now, I checked out the reviews, and they're not great.
Oh, no, that's just disgusting. The meat has like a weird aftertaste. Like it almost kind of tastes like sausage.
This TikToker says the buns look like hockey pucks.
Look at the bottom of my buns. Like,
all my sandwiches were like this, it's a freaking hockey puck.
Honestly, in my experience, Mr. Beast Burger has been perfectly acceptable. But, you know, Mr. Beast is going to have a target on his back. Mr. Beast, whose real name is Jimmy Donaldson, wants a court to stop the company from selling the burger offerings using
Why do
the
they
Mr.
say
Beast
his real name?
But Virtual Dining Concepts has countersued, asserting that Donaldson and Beast Investments tried to sabotage the company because it refused to
Like
sell
it's
him
their
a burger
business.
steak. Yes, I guess you could say they've got beef.
Oh.
Now, the Mr. Beast complaint opens with a bit of extra mustard. Okay, I promise, that's the last food pun. Donaldson touts his almost 200 million YouTube subscribers and compares himself to Joe DiMaggio. When
Yes.
Joe DiMaggio was asked why he hustled on every play of every game, he responded that there's always a kid who may be seeing me for the first time. I owe him my best. And now is probably a good time to remind you that a complaint is a one-sided legal document with unproven allegations that's partially about starting the lawsuit, but also it's about PR as well. And Jimmy's lawyers are definitely taking liberty with this one. But to be fair, if I had 200 million subscribers, you'd probably hear me talking about it as well. So feel free to smash that like and subscribe button. But anyway, Mr. Beast contracted with Virtual Dining Concepts in March of 2020 to launch and run a virtual dining brand called Mr. Beast Burger. The business would create a virtual restaurant with a selection of Mr. Beast branded food items, but would then partner with existing restaurants who would prepare those items and share in a significant portion of the revenue from their sales. By 2021, VDC had opened over 1,700 virtual locations, but it received some mixed reviews. Some derided it as disgusting, revolting, and inedible. Some customers said they were shocked Donaldson would be involved in such a subpar product. For example, this Reddit post claims that a Mr. Beast burger was mostly just raw meat, which you can see in the photo. And the complaint points out that more than half of the Mr. Beast burger virtual restaurants have less than 2 out of 5 stars, which is well below the median score of 4 stars across the platform. And Donaldson says he attended regular weekly or bi-weekly meetings with VDC in an attempt to address the quality control issues, but VDC didn't do enough to address the concerns. According to Jimmy, Virtual Dining Concepts was more focused on developing similar products with, quote, other celebrities for its own benefit to do quality control on Mr. Beast Burger. And there are other allegations that VDC was overly committed to global expansion of Mr. Beast Burger instead of quality control. Now, apparently, despite these problems, on January 23rd, 2022, Jimmy went ahead and contracted with VDC to open brick-and-mortar locations, and they signed a second contract. The parties opened one brick-and-mortar store in New Jersey at the American Dream Mall, and it was an instant hit. Over 10,000 people swarmed the restaurant on opening day.
Oh, come on. Are you serious? Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh my God, it's a feeding frenzy. Yes. Ah, don't kill me. This is it, isn't it? This is, I finally got here, didn't I? No, this is not it. This is some UC shit, but I'll take the meds if you got them. Meds, yeah. Oh yeah, med pack, that's very good. I need it. Save. Right on, well, that was good. I can't go in the ship. Or, well, I guess I could go in the ship. I could go in the ship, I guess. Oh, I'm locked elsewhere, damn it. Oh, well, that's okay. This is a cool ship.
And in fact, calling the submission did an entire documentary about the opening of this particular location.
Wow.
But Mr. Beast says that Virtual Dining Concepts dragged its feet on opening more restaurants because over 90% of its revenue was coming from the virtual business. So here's part of the issue. On one hand, Mr. Beast says that VDC's management of Mr. Beast Burger was a train wreck, and on the other hand, he was eager to expand their agreement into brick-and-mortar businesses. And his argument is that if he doubled down on the business relationship, he and his people would finally be able to fix all those problems. However, we don't have the contract in front of us, so we don't actually know if it gave him control or influence over the food quality. That's right, it's contract law. Or yes, more specifically, it all depends on what's actually written in a contract itself. But the complaint says that the parties entered into an endorsement agreement that gave VDC the right to utilize Mr. Beast's name, images, likeness, voice, picture and photograph, signature, biographical data, endorsements, and statements to market and promote the brand. However, Mr. Beast retained all of his own intellectual property rights, and it gave him the right to approve all uses of his image and likeness. And the approval must be in writing. And Mr. Beast says that VDC registered trademarks for Mr. Beast Burger in the European Union, Canada, Thailand, Singapore, Mexico, and Malaysia without his prior written approval. The trademarks were registered solely in VDC's name. And Mr. Beast says he's never made any money from this particular deal. Now, Mr. Beast and Beast Investments asked the court for a declaratory judgment that would allow them to terminate the entirety of the Mr. Beast Burger business. They say that the second agreement, which he signed to expand the business into brick and mortar, gives him the right to terminate the contract if, quote, Mr. Beast Burger materially and irreparably tarnishes Mr. Beast's reputation. The complaint says that Virtual Dining Concepts failed to, quote, create a jointly owned entity with plaintiff for the brick and mortar side of the business, that it failed to let Donaldson appoint a manager of the business, and it failed to transfer shares of Virtual Dining Concepts Holdings, Inc. to Beast Investments as required by the agreement. And Mr. Beast's second cause of action is for a material breach of the endorsement agreement. He argues that Virtual Dining Concepts tarnished the Mr. Beast brand. Now, tarnished is a technical term for trademark law, but it says that it tarnished the brand by filing at least 6 international trademark registrations without prior approval, creating and disseminating advertising and marketing materials that feature the brand attributes without getting Mr. Beast's approval, failing to pay Donaldson, and consistently serving inedible food and providing incompetent service. The third and final cause of action is for full accounting of the business's profits. Inequitable accounting is a demand that the other party turn over the books for inspection. The plaintiffs want VDC to prepare detailed schedules of income and expenses over a defined period to determine how much money the VDC company owns. Now, Mr. Beast and Beast Investments are asking for a jury trial, royalties, and the right to terminate the contract, and they want VDC to immediately stop using the Mr. Beast brand. Now, Mr. Beast seems to have some really good lawyers, but if you want a great lawyer, my firm, the Eagle Team, can help. If you've been in a car crash, dealt with sexual harassment, or suffered from cancer, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. Just click on the link in the description for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle Team. The link's below. Now, unsurprisingly, Virtual Dining Concepts sees things differently. They countersued Mr. Beast and Beast Ventures for breach of contract. Quote, this case is about a social media celebrity who believes his fame means that his word does not matter, that the facts do not matter, and that he can renege and breach his contractual obligations without consequence. And Virtual Dining Concepts contends that when they contracted with Donaldson, the parties agreed that Mr. Beast would, quote, become the face of a virtual restaurant brand in exchange for a share of the revenue and later a stake in the business. VDC says that Donaldson was the one who pushed the rapid expansion of Beast Burger. Quote, while plaintiffs originally planned to open Mr. Beast Burger in a smaller select number of locations, defendants pushed plaintiffs to open Mr. Beast Burger in as many locations as possible. BDC downplays the negative reviews, saying that customer reviews of Mr. Beast Burger met or exceeded industry averages, and that the brand was overwhelmingly well received by the media, the general public, and customers alike. By way of brief illustration only, in 2022, of the 2 million orders placed on DoorDash and Uber Eats alone, almost 70% of the customer reviews included 5-star ratings, and in 2023, almost half of Mr. Beast Burger customers are returning customers. BDC says the actual complaints were relatively few in number compared to the overall number of burgers sold. So if the reviews weren't that bad, then why would Mr. Beast start attacking Mr. Beast Burger on social media accounts? Well, VDC claims that behind the scenes, Donaldson was trying to, quote, pressure them to sell all or a material portion of Mr. Beast Burger to him by using his massive online presence to sabotage the brand and plaintiff's business. One tweet implied that Jimmy was quitting Mr. Beast Burger. Quote, I started Mr. Beast Burger to help restaurants make more money during the pandemic, and it worked. But sadly, when working with 2,000 restaurants I don't own, it's impossible to guarantee order quality. I'm moving on from Mr. Beast Burger so I can focus on Feastables and making snacks. Now, Jimmy deleted that tweet, but the media ran story after story stating that the brand was closing down. VDC says that Donaldson and his licensing company, quote, schemed to exploit their leverage and renege on their agreements in an effort to seek a better, more lucrative deal. Now, VDC claims that the negative comments materially damaged the business and its partner restaurants. Quote, Donaldson's baseless and unlawful disparagement had the intended effect. Mr. Beast Burger's reputation was materially damaged, if not destroyed. Customers abandoned the brand, and plaintiffs' hard-won relationships with vendors, partners, and suppliers were shattered, causing damages to plaintiffs that, according to the evidence and Donaldson's own statements regarding the value of Mr. Beast Burger, are in the 9-figure range. Sadly, Donaldson's conduct has also damaged the bottom lines of hundreds of restaurants across the country and around the world. VDC doesn't deny making the trademark applications, but it claims that it was consistent with the endorsement agreement. And the company alleges that under the agreement's terms, the intellectual property developed for the brand would be jointly owned by Donaldson and VDC. The company says that they always plan to assign the trademarks to the party's jointly owned company, but Donaldson, quote, blocked the necessary corporate paperwork to create the company. Now, as for Mr. Beast's claim that he hasn't shared in the profits of Mr. Beast Burger, VDC says it transferred the shares into his account on March 28, 2022. VDC says that Beast Investments tried to obtain a larger share of the brand with proposals in November 2022, February 2023, and June 2023, but VDC apparently rejected all proposals as unreasonable and unacceptable. The company claims that these rejections prompted Beast Investments and Donaldson to turn on the brand. Quote, frustrated by their inability to extract a new deal more favorable to defendants, on March 30th, 2023, Defendants Counsel sent a letter to plaintiffs fabricating several alleged breaches of the agreement. So VDC's first cause of action is for breach of contract and argues that Jimmy failed to make personal appearances, refused to attend important production sessions to make marketing materials, failed to promote the brand on social media, purposefully made untruthful and misleading statements, denied the company access to the brand's social media accounts, and disparaged the brand's products and services. VDC also claims that Donaldson failed to form the jointly owned company for the brick-and-mortar business, that he failed to promote it, and that he failed to use good faith, commercially reasonable efforts to negotiate and finalize the transaction documents. And VDC says that Donaldson violated the non-compete, non-solicitation provision of the agreement by, quote, enticing away, persuading, and or attempting to persuade clients, customers, suppliers, marketing partners, and other vendors to discontinue their relationship with VDC and go elsewhere. VDC also claims that Mr. Beast breached the covenant of good faith and fair dealing and engaged in tortious interference with contractual relations by making media posts that were intended to tarnish the Beast Burger brand. So with that out of the way, let's get to the meat of this matter.
In the summer of 2002, the director of the British intelligence agency MI6, Richard Dearlove, traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with the director of the CIA, George Tenet. The topic of the meeting was Iraq and its leader, Saddam Hussein. In the meeting, the CIA director shared classified information with his British counterpart, who then traveled back to London to 10 Downing Street, the home of the Prime Minister, Tony Blair. Dearlove told his Prime Minister everything about what was really happening behind the scenes in the United States. How the US was planning to invade Iraq no matter what. It was a highly classified meeting, but notes were taken and classified and put into a memo. That memo was later leaked to British author and journalist Michael Smith, who published it in 2005. And that's what we're looking at. A secret meeting, and the memo it produced, meant only for the eyes of top British officials. It was an explosive leak. What we see is that Dearlove tells his Prime Minister everything he heard in Washington a few days earlier, and that this was a very different story than the one the Bush administration was telling to the public. That an American invasion was inevitable, that Bush's people were fixated on removing Saddam Hussein from power, no matter what, and that the US government was blatantly cooking up intel and facts to help sell their invasion. This document shows us how power really works in our world. How a small group of people decided to topple a dictator, to occupy a country, and then invented a story to support their plan. It was a false story, but it helped them sell a horrifying war. It's a story that is revealed in detail by the Downing Street memo.
States like these constitute an axis of evil.
One last chance to avoid war. The entire world must know that we will take whatever action is necessary.
Hey, we are interrupting the programming for a commercial break. That's how we're able to make videos and do all of this, because we have sponsors. If you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you will know that I am a giant fan of therapy. professional therapy with a professional therapist. I went because I felt like I wanted to understand my mind better. I wanted to understand some of my demons better. Been doing it for 3 years, and it has reshaped the way that I see the world. The sponsor of today's video is BetterHelp, who is a company that is trying to make therapy more accessible using technology. Usually when you try to find a therapist, you call around, at least here in the United States, to like see if your insurance works and if there's availability, and you go sit in an office. With BetterHelp, you sign up and you fill out a questionnaire, and then BetterHelp matches you with somebody in their massive network of licensed therapists. There's like tens of thousands of people in this network, and they will match you with somebody. And unlike the traditional way, you can be communicating with a therapist in as little as like 48 hours, which is mind-blowing for those of us who have gone the traditional way before. If you don't like your therapist, you can switch for free and choose somebody else in their massive network. If you're not interested in like a video call, you can just do it over text if that's how you prefer to communicate. The point is that learning to trust and communicate with a professional can have huge benefits on your life, and BetterHelp tries to make it a more frictionless process for you to get connected with a good therapist and start changing your life with therapy. We live in a time where therapy is more and more normalized, and I love that, and I love that BetterHelp is working hard to get people into therapy. There's a link in my description. It's betterhelp.com/Johnny Harris. When you click the link, it helps support the channel, but it also gets you in on 10% off your first month, so you can try it out at a discount and see if it's a good fit for you. For me, therapy took a few months to develop that trust and develop an understanding of how it was working.
Therapy is good. It helped me.
And see if it has
I'm doing so much better.
for you. And again, you can cancel anytime if you feel like it isn't a good fit for you. Thank you, BetterHelp, for sponsoring today's video. And with that, let's get back into it with the Downing Street memo.
On September the 11th, enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. The United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps in Afghanistan.
Let's start by looking at another document from the fall of 2001, when Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz created this memo for his boss, Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense. This was just 10 weeks after the attacks that changed the course of history. But this document wasn't about that. It was about Iraq, a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. Rumsfeld reviewed the document before meeting with an army general. He marked it up with his notes, giving us insight into what the Secretary of Defense of the United States was really thinking about after 9/11. How this group of military leaders were set on, quote, building momentum to topple Iraq's dictator Saddam Hussein, to decapitate the government, a government that was no longer useful to them. Saddam Hussein had been a useful client to the United States, especially in the 80s when he was waging a war against Iran, an enemy of the United States. But those days were now over. Saddam had turned into just a troublemaker in the region, creating instability that could threaten the U.S.'s easy access to oil.
2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor.
And in many ways, Iraq was an old mess in need of cleaning up. A mess that Bush Sr. had failed to resolve during the first Gulf War. Iraq was supposed to disarm itself after that war, but had kicked out the UN weapons inspector teams. But that wasn't the main reason why right after 9/11 these guys were talking about invading Iraq. A bigger reason is that these leaders wanted to remind the world who the global superpower was. They needed to, after being brutally attacked on their own soil. A non-US friendly regime like Iraq couldn't be allowed to stand in a post-9/11 world. Or, in the words of Rumsfeld himself, hours after the towers fell, quote, we need to bomb something else to show that we're big and strong and not going to be pushed around. Iraq and its leader was that something else.
Aww.
And now Bush and his advisors were looking at a plan to make it a reality. But how to start the war? Could they tie Saddam Hussein to something that Americans feared, like 9/11 or anthrax? Or could they tell a story about weapons of mass destruction? What other countries could they bring in to support their invasion? And of course, the most important consideration, Rumsfeld jots it here at the end, they would need an influence campaign. They would need to sell the war. And when should they begin? How about right away?
Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror.
3 months later, the president was telling the world that Iraq was one of a group of evil countries that the U.S. must oppose in the global fight against good and evil.
States like these constitute an axis of evil. The price of indifference would be catastrophic.
By the summer of 2002, this idea that Bush's advisors had scratched down after 9/11 was developing into an official policy. That handwritten influence campaign to sell the war was now in full swing.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
The Iraqi regime has been free to pursue the development of weapons of mass destruction.
We know they have weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction.
And this is exactly what the head of MI6 told Prime Minister Tony Blair at his house in the summer of 2002 after meeting with the CIA in Washington. It's what we see in the Downing Street memo, that there was a perceptible shift in attitude in Washington, and that the U.S. invasion of Iraq was now seen as inevitable, and that they were now fixing intelligence around a decision that they had already made, and that the U.S. wasn't really planning to work with the UN. They didn't want weapons inspections or getting UN approval for military force. And crucially, the head of the MI6 tells the Prime Minister that these Bush people aren't really thinking much about the aftermath of such an invasion.
What is inevitable is not regime change, it is disarmament of weapons of mass destruction.
This memo wasn't supposed to be seen by anyone but just a few, and that's why we can learn from it. It serves as one of the most potent pieces of evidence that the Bush administration was maneuvering two very different stories. Their private story about the need to remove a dictator to project U.S. power, which was in stark contrast to the public story that they had to tell to sell the invasion. Their influence campaign.
Any country on the face of the earth with an active intelligence program knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
Because they knew that if they were really going to sell this war, they would need to convince not only the American public, but also Congress, and at least partially the international community. What we learn in the Downing Street memo is that they had settled on two main focus points for their story. That Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, and that they're also working with the masterminds of 9/11. Not long after this meeting between MI6 and the CIA, Bush and his allies ramp up their influence campaign to sell their war.
We've learned that Iraq has trained Al-Qaeda members in bomb-making, poisons.
The sales pitches to the American people for the invasion of Iraq were made with absolute certainty. Certainty that Iraq had WMDs.
Okay, I'm going to pause the eat here. I'll be right back.
He would not have a WMD program. We know he does have one.
Certainty that they wanted to use them against Americans and American allies.
Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction, that he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us.
Certainty that Iraq was harboring terrorists.
And Al-Qaeda terrorists escaped from Afghanistan and are known to be in Iraq.
And certainty that Iraq was working on obtaining nuclear weapons.
And Iraq's state-controlled media has reported numerous meetings between Saddam Hussein and his nuclear scientists, leaving little doubt about his continued appetite for these weapons.
And these speeches were working. By the fall of 2002, Americans were in favor of an invasion of Iraq by just a narrow majority. But there was just one problem, that all of these statements were lies. Indeed, this was already known in the secret rooms of Downing Street, that the US was fixing their facts and their intel to match their already made decision. Iraq's supposed links to Al-Qaeda were based on one interrogation of a guy whose testimony lacked, quote, specific details, and who was intentionally lying about it to mislead his interrogators. Bush and his allies knew this. It was clearly documented back in February of 2002. And yet, publicly, the scary story about Al-Qaeda being in Iraq continued to be sold by Bush and his people.
The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax, nerve gas, and nuclear weapons for over a decade.
The case for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was equally thin, and senior officials knew it. Like in September 2002, when Donald Rumsfeld received this report from the Joint Chiefs assessing what real evidence there actually was for WMD in Iraq. The report is shockingly honest, and it says that the conclusion that Saddam has WMD, quote, relied heavily on analytic assumptions and judgments rather than hard evidence. That's word salad for it was speculation and conjecture. The report goes on to say that they didn't have anything solid on nuclear weapons-related facilities, and concludes that they don't know of any facilities where Saddam may be producing or testing biological weapons. And so we know now that they had almost no evidence for their story about why the US should invade Iraq. And yet, even knowing this, they kept selling the same story, convincing the American people.
There's no doubt in my mind he wants to have a nuclear weapon, and he's got some capacity.
Wherever threats are forming against our country, we will respond.
But they couldn't go on like this forever. They knew that if they were really going to sell this war, they were going to need to show real, convincing evidence, not to the people, but to Congress. And this is where we get another instance of fixing the intelligence to fit the policy. It came in September 2002 when President Bush asked Congress to give him the authority to invade Iraq. In response, Senate leaders requested an immediate national intelligence estimate, which is a report from the entire intelligence community meant to help Congress make informed decisions. This could be really bad for Bush and his allies. So he and the CIA get hard at work pulling together a report that fits their story, intelligence to back up all their public statements and speeches. They come out with this highly redacted report that they deliver in October of 2002. The report makes some very strong claims. They claim that Iraq has been building more WMD, that they have chemical and biological weapons, and that they will have a nuclear weapon during this decade. And to congressional leaders, this appeared rock solid. Here was the entire intelligence community coming together, saying that Iraq had horrific weapons, and that they wanted to get more.
Saddam Hussein has composed a scarlet chapter of terror. Our only responsible option is to confront this threat before Americans die.
There is no such thing as a Democrat or Republican war.
So in that same month, based on this report and all of these public speeches, Congress gives the green light for war.
Fuckers.
But this national intelligence estimate was deeply flawed. It was a perfect example of the fixed intelligence described in the Downing Street memo. It was put together in less than a month, totally rushed. The report had been plagued by groupthink and directed by political pressure, with the Bush administration pushing analysts to deliver a report that matched their conclusions that they had already come to months earlier. And they did this using very old intelligence. The CIA hadn't had any human assets on the ground for years, so their report wasn't even based off of anything after 1998. But it didn't matter. Bush and his allies had successfully sold the war to Congress and the American people. But there was one last hurdle. It was the international community, which would mean they would have to face the UN process that they apparently had no patience for.
Iraq has answered a decade of UN demands with a decade of defiance.
So it's November 2002, and in response to the rising tensions between Iraq and the US, the UN Security Council passes this resolution, 1441. It was a measure that was meant to give Iraq a final opportunity to comply with weapons inspections, to show the world that they had fully disarmed and had no weapons of mass destruction. Bush and his allies saw this as an opportunity. If they could somehow show that Iraq wasn't complying with this new inspection process, this resolution implied that they would be justified in invading the country. Their long-desired war would be on. But they had a problem, which is that Iraq and Saddam Hussein were complying with the weapons inspections. Over the course of 4 months, UN weapons inspectors searched Iraq from top to bottom. They were led by Hans Blix, the former head of the International Atomic Energy Agency. They conducted over 900 inspections at over 500 locations. And they didn't find anything. No WMD, no biological weapons, no nuclear weapons programs.
Iraq has on the whole cooperated rather well. Access has been provided to all sites we have wanted to inspect: universities, military bases, presidential sites, and private residences.
Hans Blix did find 2 things that were important. First, they did find some ballistic missiles that the UN says have an effective range that makes them illegal, so they would need to be destroyed by Iraq. And second, there were some chemical weapons that the Iraqi regime said cannot be accounted for. But Blix insists that this does not mean that they have these weapons. It just means that they need more time to work out the accounting situation. But this error was exactly what the Bush circle needed to justify their invasion.
I call now on the distinguished Secretary of State of the United States of America.
They sent their most respected cabinet member to the UN, Secretary of State Colin Powell. He came equipped with photos of what he says are mobile weapons facilities.
Saddam Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction.
He plays tapes that he says prove that the Iraqis are hiding their weapons.
We evacuated everything to make sure it was not around when the inspectors showed up.
And then he says that this is solid evidence that shows that Iraq is violating the UN resolution that told them to disarm. This whole thing contradicts what the UN weapons inspectors had found in their hundreds and hundreds of inspections. They bulldoze the process and say they have justification to invade.
My colleagues, we have an obligation to see that our resolutions are complied with.
They've got the American public on board, they've got Congress on board, and now the UK is in lockstep.
This is the time for this House to show that we will stand up for what we know to be right. To show that we will confront the tyrannies and dictatorships and terrorists who put our way of life at risk.
The Bush administration abandons the UN process, and that March, his people do what they set out to do 18 months earlier, when they were looking for something else to bomb. To show who's really in charge on the world stage.
My fellow citizens, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. America faces an enemy who has no regard for conventions of war or rules of morality.
The death of my people. My brothers and sisters.
Bush's war took the life of an estimated 500,000 Iraqis and thousands more who fought for their country. And over the course of a decade occupying Iraq, no weapons were found, no nuclear facilities, no mobile weapons labs. In fact, it seemed like Iraq had dismantled its nuclear program back in 1991 and the rest of its chemical and biological weapons just a few years later. After the invasion, the US never allowed the UN inspectors back into the country to help with their search. The US would never find a way to link the Iraqi regime to Al-Qaeda or to anthrax.
Nope.
Colin Powell, the Secretary of State, who played a major role in selling this war to the international community, would later say that he regrets his part in starting the war.
Deeply regret that some of the information I presented, which was multi-source, was wrong.
Hans Blix, the chief weapons inspector for the UN, would comment later that year that it is sort of fascinating that you can have 100% certainty about weapons of mass destruction and zero certainty about where they are. We may never know what was in the heart and minds of these senior leaders, whether they truly believed their own lies, whether they felt justified in the choices they made. But what we can learn from this story is how these leaders behaved when they thought no one was watching, when they thought they could tell a compelling story to the public while having a totally different set of motivations, and how with enough fear and enough deception, you can lead an entire society into an unprovoked war, changing the course of history in the process.
Our economy is in recession, and the civilized world faces unprecedented dangers. Yet the state of our union has never been stronger.
Joseph Smith. He's someone I know well. He's the author of a worldview that I held for most of my life. I taught it to hundreds of people when I was a missionary.
Oh, wow.
It's a religion and a gospel that I deeply believed in. One full of hope and meaning and
nothing wrong with Mormonism if you keep the
stories,
sex out of it.
Stories about where we came from and where we're going. Let me show you what Joseph Smith built and how he did it. How a non-religious, uneducated kid in upstate New York created a global movement that would gather huge numbers of followers in a very short time, and who were pushed out from town to town, often with violence. I want to show you how these people held on to the vision and mission that Joseph Smith taught, the building of a new utopian society one founded on celestial laws, one that was preparing for the end of the world and the second coming of Jesus Christ. So let me tell you the story of Joseph Smith, the church he built, and how that church and its mission still exists today. Hey, before we open up this large can of worms that I've been thinking about for many years, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, the people who make this all possible. Thank you, BetterHelp, for sponsoring today's video. BetterHelp is kind of relevant to today's video because BetterHelp is a platform for therapy. A few years ago, I started seeing a therapist every week, not because I had some clinical mental health issue that I was trying to address, but rather because I wasn't feeling good. I knew there was things in my life that I needed to work through, and there are professionals for that. Going to therapy has changed my mind. It has changed my life. It has changed how I see the world, and it has made my life better, very objectively. BetterHelp is a platform that makes therapy more accessible to more people. You sign up for BetterHelp, you take a quiz that kind of tells them a little bit about you and your needs and your goals, and then they match you with a professional licensed therapist that you can start communicating with in as little as 48 hours. You can have your therapy sessions as a phone call, as a video chat, or even as a text message if you prefer that, if that's the most comfortable version of therapy for you. If your therapist isn't a good fit, you can change to a different therapist for free. With access to BetterHelp's growing network of professional licensed therapists, they have like tens of thousands of different therapists. You can find somebody who's the right fit for you. All of this makes finding a therapist much more frictionless than the traditional methods. I'm a major supporter of that goal because I believe therapy is a life changer, at least it was for me. So there's a link in my description. It's betterhelp.com/Johnny Harris. When you click that link, you help support the channel. You also get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can try it out at a discount, see if it fits for you. So I'm grateful to BetterHelp for existing, but also for sponsoring today's video. With that, let's dive back into this. Let's talk about the prophet Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith was born in the perfect place at the perfect time. It was the early 1800s, and the US had just thrown off England to become a new country, and it was going through some massive growing pains. Most of these new Americans who had just left the old world rejected a lot of old world things, namely religion. Only 10% of white Americans regularly attended church at this time. So to help revive God, you have all these super charismatic preachers who left the cities and went out to the countryside to preach. And this led to an explosion of religious thought, especially in upstate New York. So now you have all these like hyper-reformist religions that were replacing old-style authoritarian type churches. All these new wild religious flavors that were more emotional, expressive, and personal. I mean, none of us were alive at this time, but you can kind of imagine like this brand new country founded on these new ideals. It was unprecedented times. America felt special and different, but also kind of scary. Revolution in the new world, new science, magical technology, new ideas, both wholesome and sinful, all of it speeding up at an increasing rate. For a lot of people, this was a sign that the end of the world was coming and that Jesus, like he prophesied, would come back to usher in this 1,000 years of glory for those who believed in him and 1,000 years of fire for those who didn't. This was called the millennium. So a lot of these new churches that were cropping up kind of claimed to be the place that was preparing the earth for the second coming. Like they were God's chosen administrators on the earth in the final days before it all ended. It was scary, it was exciting, and God was talking to people again in new ways. And this is the context that Joseph Smith was born into in 1805. Born to a mother who was swept up in the excitement of all these new religions, and a father who wasn't really religious at all. It's kind of like a lot of people at the time, a family that was religiously lost, but not for long. In addition to being a frothy religious environment, upstate New York was also a place where people hunted for treasure. There was this culture of folk magic and legends that led to the search for riches and jewels that were potentially buried by Spanish explorers or pirates of the past, or artifacts that were hidden in Native American burial mounds. And their methods for hunting for all this treasure were mystical and magical. They used seer stones, crystals, rods, visions through dreams, all of this to help them locate buried treasure. And young Joseph Smith was very caught up in this treasure hunting craze. He wasn't educated, he barely had any schooling, he could kind of read and write. He wasn't religious, but from a young age, he showed himself as a skilled treasure hunter. I mean, let's keep some perspective. In all of our research, we didn't find a single, document showing that he actually found any treasure, but he managed to convey to the people around him that he was an expert treasure hunter using mythical methods. So this is the context that you need to know to really understand this story. We're in upstate New York in the early 1800s. There is this frenzy of folk magic and treasure hunting, and the place is ablaze with religious fervor. And there's talk of the last days and the millennium of fire and glory that was coming any day now. But the story really begins in the spring of 1820. Joseph, a 14-year-old boy, gets curious about religion. And after visiting a bunch of churches and finding no answers, he decides to go into a grove of trees to ask God which church was true. This movie that we're watching right now, I know by heart because I've watched it hundreds of times, of course, dubbed in Spanish. I was a missionary in Tijuana, and the first thing that I would teach people was this story, and I would often show them this movie.
Wow. I kneeled down and began to offer the desires of my heart.
So Joseph Smith is in this grove, and he's praying. And after a run-in with the devil,
exerting all my strength to call upon God,
he sees a pillar of light, brighter than the sun, directly over his head. And within that light, he sees two people whose brightness defy all description. And he finds out that it's God the Father and his son, Jesus Christ. And Jesus goes on to tell him that none of the churches that he's been investigating are true, and that instead, Joseph is being called to do the work of God, to restore the real true church that had been lost from the earth, to restore this church to prepare the world for the second coming of Jesus and the millennium that he will usher in. This event is referred to as the first vision, and it is the founding story of the LDS Church, the Mormon Church, like most people know it. As a member of the church, from a very young age, you learn this story. You sing about it, you talk about it, you study it, and every few years the church comes out with a new video version representing the first vision. Okay, so this is just the beginning. A few years go by, Joseph doesn't tell anyone about his vision, but by 1823, Joseph is a late teenager, and one night he's sleeping in his little humble cabin with his family, and he says that an angel appears to him. The angel is named Moroni. By the way, if you ever see a Mormon temple, big white building, you will see a depiction of the angel Moroni on the top of that temple with the trumpet pointing east. But for now, he's an angel in Joseph Smith's room, telling young Joseph that yes, the second coming of Christ is right around the corner, and that yes, just like God and Jesus told him a few years ago, he has been called to prepare the world for the second coming. And if that wasn't enough, Moroni tells him that there is a book that is written on golden plates that is buried in a hill near Joseph's house. The book is an important record of a group of Jews who left Jerusalem in 600 BC and came to the Americas. Anyway, I'll explain that in just a second. And don't worry, says Moroni, along with the plates, there's the gear you need to translate these plates into English. Joseph just needs to get a bit older and he'll be ready to translate the plates. At this point, Joseph tells his family what's been happening and they believe him. So by the time he's 21, he's instructed to go to the hill Cumorah near his house and get the plates. Okay, so now Joseph Smith, in his 20s, he's this uneducated, unreligious treasure hunter, and he starts to focus in on something totally new. In the words of one believing Mormon historian, Richard Bushman, he starts to orient himself away from treasure and towards translation. He's becoming a prophet. So Joseph says he goes and gets these plates, and people try to rob him, but eventually he gets them secured. And in a little cabin in rural New York, Joseph begins the work of translating this stack of metal plates that no one else is allowed to see. He would sit on one side of a curtain so that no one else could see. And he says he looked through these stones at the Egyptian engravings on these golden plates, and they would turn into English. And then he would dictate them out loud to a scribe, sometimes his wife or other early believers who were supporting him. And that scribe would write them down. At other points, Joseph didn't even
Wow. Wow. What? I can't do this, I don't think, unless I get the... Can I get the teleport too, or... Oh, no. There we go. Oh, God, run. Okay. Well, hopefully this will be good, but I have to go leave to go sell. Oops. Seems odd.
Ever since I got here, as much as I love uncover, anything I can learn from is a help.
Oh no, wait, oh. Wait,
See you later.
Damn it. Autosave. Pocket sand.
Even need the plates to translate. He could hide them somewhere else, and he would use his personal seer stone, the one that he used back when he was just a treasure hunter before he says he was called as a prophet. This little chocolate-colored egg-shaped stone. He would put it into a hat, and then he would bury his face in the hat, and he said that the stone would light up with the words that he was supposed to dictate to his scribe. His scribe would write it down, and the Book of Mormon was being written. Now listen, all of this seems really weird and wild to us now, very easily like, okay, clearly this guy's making it up. But at the time, mystical visions and treasure hunting and seer stones, this was all very normal in society. Folk magic, Native American artifacts, none of this was very fringe. And Joseph had been doing stuff like this for a decade, which is why his parents and other people in his community supported him. The difference, though, at this time is that he was blending his treasure hunting skills and his folk magic sensibilities with this religious revival that was happening at the time to create something kind of unique. So anyway, he's in his early 20s, he's translating the Book of Mormon. He faces a bunch of ups and downs, he goes through a few scribes.
Stay safe, okay?
And after a very productive 90-day window, 24-year-old, barely educated Joseph Smith finishes dictating 588 pages of text that would become the Book of Mormon. Joseph says that he gives the plates back to Moroni and then takes the manuscript of the pages to a printer. That's how we have the Book of Mormon. This is my Book of Mormon. Maps. My early exposure to maps.
You will be scanned as you enter the city.
So the Book of Mormon is incredibly important to this story because it was the main validator for Joseph Smith in those early days and continues to be a foundational part for believers in the LDS faith. That's because Joseph Smith wasn't religious or educated, and now suddenly he's writing this Bible-like book in a few months.
Hope you're finding
and yes,
everything
this
you
book
need.
is definitely full of a lot of like full-blown copy and paste jobs from like the Bible. But there's also like a lot of really compelling stuff in here in terms of religious lessons, complex histories, nods back to like an understanding of Hebrew language and culture. This is not the type of guy that his town saw him as. He was a treasure hunter and a farm kid, not a religious man, and definitely not a prophet.
Mr. Smith, could you tell me more about that book?
Yes. Yes, I could.
Okay, so let's be clear on what Joseph Smith said the Book of Mormon is. It's not what a lot of people say, which is like the Mormon Bible. The book tells the story of a group of Jews in Jerusalem in around 600 BC. They're told to leave the city before it gets destroyed. So they leave the city, they walk in the desert for a while, probably to like Oman is what a lot of Mormons think. And then they build a boat and travel across the ocean for a very long time until they reach the Americas, somewhere in like North, Central, or South America. The foundation of the story is about these brothers of the original family who like eventually split off and they like hate each other and they grow up into these two different civilizations, the Nephites and the Lamanites, who are always fighting with each other, and there's all these prophets and there's all this drama that happens. And the introduction to my Book of Mormon says the Lamanites, the people who came over from Jerusalem, are, quote, the principal ancestors of the American Indians. And a few years ago, they did change that to the Lamanites being among the ancestors of the American Indians. But yeah, the point is that the Book of Mormon is a history of these Jews turned indigenous Americans. And unsurprisingly, there's a whole community of believers who work to validate that this is actually a historic record. But no, in reality, there's no archaeological, genetic, or linguistic evidence that supports the Book of Mormon's assertion that Jewish people migrated to the Americas around 600 BC. For believers, the most important part of this book
Why would he
is the
say
climax of the whole
that?
thing, where in 33 AD, Jesus, having recently been crucified over in the old world in Jerusalem, gets resurrected over there and comes to visit the people in America, which is where this painting came from. This is a painting that is hanging in a lot of LDS churches. It shows Jesus Christ among the ancient civilizations of the Americas. Yeah, some pretty wild stories. So yeah, I know we're all over the place, and we'll get back to Joseph Smith's life for a second, but as someone who has read this book dozens of times, I can tell you that when you're a believer, this is a really compelling piece of work. You can read these pages, you can read about the stories and the lessons and the metaphors, and you can take a lot from it. And the biggest thing that you take from it is that it is proof that Joseph Smith was actually called of God to prepare the world for the second coming, that he was a legitimate prophet. So, Joseph Smith, by 1830, has the Book of Mormon.
This video is made possible by Nebula. Use the link down in the description below to support Real Life Lore directly by signing up, where you can watch 27 additional and exclusive full-length videos in my ongoing Nebula Modern Conflict series, covering recent major wars and crises, including this video's next part covering the biggest battle fought in Europe since the Second World War, the Battle of Bakhmut. In late June of 2023, a seemingly earth-shattering event of enormous historic significance took place within Russia that briefly captured the entire world's attention. The Wagner Group, a Russian government-funded private military company with as many as 50,000 mercenaries under its control, led by Yevgeny Prigozhin, suddenly launched a full-scale armed rebellion against the Russian government. For over a year beforehand, the Wagner Group had been fighting for the Russians on the front lines in Ukraine and suffered very heavy casualties in the months-long battle for the town of Bakhmut, in which the organization's leader, Prigozhin, claimed to have suffered 20,000 of his mercenaries killed in action. Prigozhin frequently criticized how the Russian military leadership was ineffectually carrying out the war in Ukraine, and repeatedly called out the Russian defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, and the Russian chief of the general staff, Valery Gerasimov, for incompetence. Prigozhin consistently asserted that the Russian military was undersupplying his Wagner Group with ammunition and retreating from areas of the front line without informing him, often leaving the Wagner Group's flanks exposed to Ukrainian counterattacks in the process. The rising tension between the professional Russian army and the mercenary Wagner Group finally exploded late on the 23rd of June 2023, when Prigozhin claimed, with very shaky evidence, that the Russian military had allegedly attacked his own troops with missiles that allegedly killed 2,000 of his mercenaries. Then, declaring himself and the Wagner Group an armed rebellion, Prigozhin demanded that both Shoigu and Gerasimov be personally handed over to him to face his own justice or else, and led around 20,000 of his mercenaries away from the front line in Ukraine, storming back across the border into Russia proper, where they quickly seized control over the major city of Rostov-on-Don, with a population of about 1.2 million people. And from there, the entire world watched on over the next several hours to see what would happen next, as the armed columns of mercenaries thundered in their tanks and trucks northwards along the M4 highway, seemingly unopposed, straight for Moscow. Along their way, they also seized control over the major Russian city of Voronezh, home to about 1.1 million people, while Vladimir Putin himself made a televised address to the nation, declaring that Prigozhin and the Wagner Group were treasonous traitors, and that they would all be ruthlessly destroyed. Military defenses and barricades were being hastily prepared around Moscow to protect the capital, just as military helicopters attempted to attack the Wagner convoys on the highway but kept getting shot down by them. It seemed nearly inevitable that the Russian Federation was catapulting head first into full-blown civil war. But nearly just as quickly as it all began, it all came to a close. Only a little more than 24 hours after launching the rebellion, Prigozhin suddenly backed down after revealing that the dictator of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, a man closely allied to the Kremlin, had quietly stepped in behind the scenes to negotiate some kind of compromise. The Wagner Group laid down their arms, withdrew from their briefly occupied cities of Voronezh and Rostov-on-Don, all criminal charges of treason were dropped, and Prigozhin and much of the Wagner Group establishment allegedly went into exile in Belarus. The 24 hours of chaos that led to that conclusion left a few dozen Russian soldiers and mercenaries killed and wounded, and a few destroyed vehicles. It represented the first major armed rebellion against central authority within the Russian Federation since the constitutional crisis of 1993 that happened 30 years previously, which had involved then-President Boris Yeltsin launching a self-coup against the Russian parliament that climaxed with Russian tanks in Moscow under Yeltsin's direct orders, shelling the house of the Soviets in Moscow, a series of events that killed and wounded hundreds and left many outside observers similarly speculating that Russia was on the brink of a full-blown civil war. But that's not what ended up happening in 1993, and it's not what ended up happening in 2023 either. Nonetheless, many videos, publications, and articles have been produced about the 24-hour Wagner rebellion, asserting that this was only the beginning of the end for Vladimir Putin's regime in Moscow, and that more chaos and rebellions to come are certain. Many have even gone so far as to suggest that the costly war in Ukraine and its consequences will lead to the supposedly inevitable dissolution of the Russian Federation itself. Just like how the costly war in Afghanistan contributed to the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and how the costly experience in World War I led to the dissolution of the Tsarist Russian Empire before it. But the thing you've got to understand is that these predictions of Putin's inevitable collapse in the Kremlin have been being produced for a very, very long time, for about as long as Putin himself has been in power. there were the pieces created pronouncing the end was nigh for Putin after the humiliatingly successful Ukrainian counteroffensives in 2022 around Kharkiv and Kherson that saw the Russians losing more than 13,000 square kilometers of occupied Ukrainian territory. There have consistently been almost countless pieces produced speculating about Putin's health and suggesting that he might literally die at any moment. There were countless more pieces pronouncing that Putin was finished and doomed to lose in Ukraine immediately after the invasion began back in February of 2022, egged on by the emergence of tens of thousands of protesters taking to the streets against the war across major Russian cities. Before that, there were all the pieces produced about the inevitable coming end of Putin over the Russian government's gross mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic, in which, depending on who you ask, anywhere between 400,000 and 820,000 Russians died, resulting in the biggest peacetime loss of life in all of Russia's contemporary history. Before that, there were those who predicted the end of Putin following the surprise election of Volodymyr Zelensky to the presidency of Ukraine in 2019. And before that, there were those who predicted the end of Putin in 2018 over the government pushing ahead of extremely unpopular pension reforms that raised the age of retirement in the country by 5 years. And before that, there were those who predicted that the rising political star of Alexei Navalny within Russia would lead to the eventual downfall of Putin. And before that, there were those who predicted that Russia's annexation of Crimea from Ukraine, the war in Donbass, and the ensuing Western financial sanctions after 2014 would lead to Putin's undoing. And before that, there were the anti-government and anti-Putin protests in 2011 and 2012 that were supposedly the beginning of the end for Putin. And before that, it was Russia's invasion of Georgia, the 2009 global financial crisis, and the cratering of global oil prices that were supposedly all the beginning of Putin's end. And before that, it was the inept and bungled Russian government responses to terror attacks in 2004 and 2002 during the Beslan school siege and the Moscow theater hostage crisis that spelled the inevitable doom for Putin's regime. As you can see, people have basically been predicting the end of Vladimir Putin's regime in Moscow for pretty much the entirety of the past 23 years, ever since he first assumed power in the country back in 2000. And yet, here he continues to stay in power in the Kremlin regardless, with a sky-high approval rating recorded by the independent Levada Center as recently as July of 2023 at 82% of the Russian public. A fact that makes any popular protest, let alone
guys, I am not feeling too well, and I'm terribly sorry. I believe I'm going to go lie down, and I'm terribly sorry. And I don't normally do this, but I don't feel too well. I'm going to lie down. Skycat.live, I'm a full-time variety gamer all day, every day. Put me on in the background. I'll be back here in a couple of hours to run Baldur's Gate 3, but I believe I would like to lie down. I don't feel too good, and I'm sorry. I'm trying to pretend that I'm okay, but I'm not. I probably better lie down. I might be sick or something. I don't know. But anyways, maybe I just need a rest or something. I don't know. But anyways, I'm sorry, guys. I normally don't bail like this, but I'll be back for the rest of the evening. I'm definitely not stopping for the night, I promise. And I will take a small break here and come back about 8:30 PST. It's like 6:30 right now, 8:30 around there, 9 o'clock, something like that. Thank you so much for the time.